Hey, it's Ron McLean. Welcome to Hockey Talk on the Rock.
With Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
All right, here we go. We are back with Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode number 100.
Woo!
The centennial mark. It's been a break. It's been a minute. We've had some time apart. It's tough with the time difference between Italy and Salt Spring Island, but here we are doing our thing. So today is Monday, March 13th in BC, and I'm sure it's also Monday, March 13th in Italy.
It is still, yeah. A few more hours.
We're going to catch up on the trade deadline week and some of the standing stuff, some local Canucks stuff, and anything else we can really think about. So you want to start it off?
Who are we starting? Trades, Canucks?
Let's start with just the first one that kicked it off. Wasn't trade deadline week, but let's talk about the Horvat Beauvillier stats just for a minute here.
Sure.
Just to keep it local. And I know, like we've talked about before, Beauvillier is playing largely with Pettersson, but man, it's starting to feel like they sold high on Horvat at the right time.
I think that my opinion is different than a lot of Canucks fans on this one, because I think that as soon as I saw that Beauvillier was included in that deal, I was like, he's going to do better in Vancouver than in New York, because you knew he was going to get an opportunity to play with better players, and also in a more offensive system. So I'm not surprised he's doing better here, but I think it's too simple to say they sold high on Horvat just because of the difference in position between center and wing, and the fact that Horvat is now basically playing without Barzal in New York. And
yeah, Barzal injury definitely plays a factor, but aren't those guys supposed to both be centermen anyways?
Like Horvat and Barzal? Yeah, but they were playing together. Like Barzal was playing on the wing with him. And they looked like they had very good chemistry. Like the two of them in the games that they played together looked really good. Mm-hmm. I think Beauvillier is fine. He's a decent player, but if he's not playing with Pettersson, he's not putting up those points. Like it's a good fit. It's nice, but Pettersson is like, if the team was in a better position and there wasn't a player called McDavid in the league, I think that Pettersson is putting up like an MVP caliber season right now. Like he's on top of his game. And I mean, Hughes as well. Like the two of them are just so much better than everyone else collectively on the Canucks. Maybe like you can argue and Kuzmenko here or there, like you can argue there's good pieces, but I really think a lot of the good that's happening for other players are coming from Pettersson and Hughes.
Yes, I will agree with you with everything you've said, but with the caveat that there have been other players who have been like middle six forwards who have had long opportunities to play with Pettersson, and they have not fit the way.
Sure, but when that's happened, has Pettersson been playing to this level that he's been playing?
Oh, for sure. He's playing the best that he has been, but it's not like he slouched before either.
No, I'm not saying that he was, but I don't think that, like, I think this season is so much more different than the rest of his career. And like, even if you look at Horvat, right, like Horvat playing on the power play with Pettersson did really help his numbers.
Yeah.
I think the Canucks I'll stick by, I think the Canucks made the right move selling Horvat, but if you're asking me who would I rather have on my team, Horvat or Beauvillier, it's Horvat like 100% of the time.
Oh, I know, but that's not the
question. That's how I was taking it.
Yeah, how like who would you rather have, the package they got or Horvat, you know?
Probably still Horvat now, given the next move. But we can get into that later. But honestly, neither of them. I'd rather have picks.
Yeah. So yeah.
So
it's like, and we'll get to the Islanders more in a little bit here, but just brass tacks on the stats here, and you're right. Barzal going down probably hurt Horvat, but he's got 5 goals, 9 points in 16 games since the trade.
Yeah.
So it's obviously way down from what he was tracking with the Canucks, and
sure,
and he did what every player wants to do, and that's have a career year
contract year.
He got all the money. So maybe he'll bounce back, but I don't think any point during his tenure with the Islanders, Barzal healthy or not, I don't think he's going to track on those same numbers that he was having before
No,
he got.
I agree with you there, but I also don't think a full season of Beauvillier is going to track on the numbers that he's putting up right now in
Oh no,
Vancouver with Pettersson.
and
Like,
hopefully not too, because he's been a good fit. But like then they're gonna have to pay him too much money, and they probably will, and that's not good.
yeah, no, I know. I get
So
what you're trying to say, but I think people oversimplify it, and I
yeah,
think they just look at the scoring and like not necessarily the positional need, because I mean you also have to consider the fact that again a center is worth a lot more than a wing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, yeah. A final note to Beauvillier: 6 goals, 13 points in his 16 games with the Canucks. So it's
Yeah.
been nice.
It's been a good fit.
Yeah, it's been a good fit. Is really what it comes down to. So that's all I've got on that. It's nice to reflect on that. Beauvillier looked noticeable when we went and saw them.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good. It was all right. And from there, well, I mean, to try and stay on sort of the same trajectory, you want to stay with Canucks or you want to talk Islanders and wildcard race?
Let's maybe let's go Islanders because we can go back to the Canucks.
Sure. Okay. So, as everyone knows by now, the pick that the Canucks got in that Horvat trade has been traded to the Red Wings. So I think most people that are in the Canucks fan base are either A, pissed, or B, pissed and really rooting for the Islanders to do well. So that it's not as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
So as we speak, they find themselves in the second wild card spot.
Yeah.
And I mean, that race is kind of flattening out a little bit. Like you can argue that Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, Washington are still all in it, but it really seems like the last 3 wildcard spots come down to Pittsburgh, the Islanders, and Florida.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. And I think if I was gonna bet money, I think it stays as it is. Like maybe Pittsburgh and the Islanders flip. I don't know. But I think that those teams will be the teams that make it in. I don't think Florida's gonna make it.
And it's tough this time of year to gain even, 4, 5, 6 points. Like Florida's playing well. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10, but so are the Islanders. And the Pittsburgh is 7-2-1 in their last 10. So
Yeah, and I mean you look at like Ottawa, they came into Vancouver on Saturday, and if they wanted to make the playoffs, they basically needed to win both the game against the Canucks and then the next night against Calgary, and they lose both, and now they're essentially done. Like that's how quick it changes, right?
yeah.
So
And I mean, there's 16 games left in their season. There's 14 games left in the Islanders season. It's a lot of room. One team could tumble quite a bit, but odds are, like we've even talked about before, in like November when a team is more than 4 points out, they usually don't make it. So
yeah,
running
and
out
like
of room.
Sorokin, if I'm picking a team to make it, I'm probably picking the team he plays on over the team with Bobrovsky. Like it's just that for me. But again, like Barzal is out. Who knows when he'll be back, but they seem to be somewhat staying afloat without him right now. So
Yeah, and agree or disagree, you're hoping the Islanders make it.
I'm hoping that Bo Horvat gets to play playoff games, and I've been hoping that since the Canucks got that pick.
Yeah,
like I would like to see it do well.
If they do make it, that means their pick is going to be 16 or higher in the first round.
Yep.
And it won't transfer to next year.
No.
So that would be best case scenario from the Horvat trade scenario, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they flipped it. So the East is fascinating. Like Boston's going to win everything, like the President's Trophy, all that. Toronto and Tampa Bay still destined to play each other.
Yeah.
Jersey, they made a big move at the trade deadline. They're tied with Carolina all of a sudden.
Yeah.
For the Metro, so we might not see the New Jersey first round. And so everything else is just that wild card race. And like you say, other teams could crawl in, but Florida is kind of the one who has the best shot to crawl in.
Yeah.
You never know. In the West, it's kind of spread out a little more in the last week. Like I looked earlier in the week and there was, I think, 5 points between the top team in the West and like the last wild card spot.
Yep.
And now it's 10. So it's a little more spread out, but
the West is insane though, because like I haven't honestly, like, okay, Colorado is a good team. Obviously, they won the Stanley Cup last year. but like they're not as good as they were last year. Part of that's from injuries, but also like some roster changes. I don't know who I'd pick to come out of the West. I have so many problems thinking about it. Like, they're just teams that have so many issues, and all of them seem to have issues.
Yeah, I mean, my gut right now would be picking LA.
I could see LA, but I could also see them losing in the first round to Edmonton if that's who they play. Like last year, I can see maybe a world if Jonathan Quick plays well for Vegas where they come out of it. I can see a world maybe with Dallas, but they seem to be so inconsistent. Like, yeah, I don't know.
So, I mean, it seems like everyone is pretty comfortable in the West, other than Winnipeg,
But
Seattle could slide down, Edmonton, Colorado could slide down. But even that being said, like Colorado being the last wildcard spot, they're only at 5 on Nashville and Calgary.
yeah,
Um, which is like we talked about in the East, like 5 points at this point in the season is hard to make up. Do you see either Calgary or Nashville making it?
I like there was a point in the season where I would have told you I was 100% confident that Calgary would figure it out and they'd make it, but they just lose games they're not meant to lose. And
Yeah.
when teams do that, it's they never make the playoffs. That's like the number one tell all that the team's not there. And Nashville, I think Nashville was very smart at the deadline and they sold off some pieces. I just don't think they have enough, but I could see them more than Calgary getting in, only because they seem to be playing kind of above their weight class, whereas Calgary's playing below.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read somewhere that like the locker room in Nashville was pretty pissed about how the organization handled the deadline to a point that it kind of like lit a fire under them. Like I'm just looking, they're 7-2-1 in their last 10 now.
Yeah.
And they sold off on Niederreiter, they sold off on Ekholm, and who was the other one they sold off on? Tanner Jeannot?
Tanner Jeannot, yeah.
So Tanner Jeannot, whatever. He was having a down year big
Yeah.
time. Get to that. The Ekholm trade, like I think, was really smart because they got a first round pick and they got Tyson Barrie, and who seems to be able to take a little bit of the offensive pressure from the blue line from Yossi off.
Yep.
So that hasn't been terrible for them. But I don't think they have what it's going to take unless UC Soros wills them into the playoffs.
Okay, this is my other question for you. In the West right now, who's the best goalie?
Ooh, I mean, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, 3
Yeah.
weeks ago, I probably would have said Hellebuck hands down.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're seeing fatigue as we get later in the season because he's played so much. Yeah, and like you can't, I don't know. Saros has been good all year. I just think that they had bad nights in front of him a lot. I might go Saros.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. To me, there's three options, which would be Hellebuck, but as you say, his play's gone downhill. Onger and Saros. Those are the three to me that are the best, but they're none of them are having outstanding seasons. Like they're all kind of, I'd say, average for them.
Yeah, and Ottinger was the other one I was looking at too.
Yeah, but when you have a good goalie, it does help. So we'll see with Nashville, but I don't think they do it. I don't think they have the talent up front.
No. And so staying on the standings, a quick update on the Bedard sweeps since Vancouver's all of a sudden 7-2-1. Talk it bump. They're 25th in the league.
Why?
And I know Philadelphia, Arizona, and Montreal are right there with them. Like it's not unbelievable to think they couldn't still finish in the bottom 5, but like we've talked about before, their schedule to wrap up the season is pretty weak.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the teams that are at the bottom of the standings can't take them for some points either, but the way they've been playing, especially with, there's a few players noticeably playing a lot better with Tocchet's system in place. Like JT Miller is back to his old form, and Brock Besser, like I'm now officially back in the keep Besser camp because he's looked like he's been playing a lot better. And that could just be his name's not in the trade rumor thing anymore or whatever. But
Yeah.
when it comes down to they have too many wingers and they need to trade somebody, I'm all for if they can move Garland without paying a price to move him. I'd be all for that, but I don't want to see them move Besser anymore.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, I've always had a soft spot for Besser. But I don't know if it's what's best for him too. Like I go back and forth with maybe he needs to get out of Vancouver, and maybe it's just he's been here too long and the team has lost too much. But I agree with you, he is playing better with Tocchet, and I enjoy watching his game. I think it's when he's used effectively, he's a very skilled, very useful player. The thing about moving Besser, right? The issue with it always was that the Canucks were gonna have to eat salary. And if you're eating salary on Besser, why are you moving him? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know if there's a market.
Like, he's at what? He's nearing 50 points on the year now, isn't he?
Yeah, he just hasn't scored many goals.
Yeah.
But like if you can move Garland, but I don't know. I don't know what that price is, and it scares me to think about it. But I will say this briefly, because I know we'll get to the Canucks at the end. But I know that Alvin has spoken about how he's going to make the team cap compliant in the summer, and he's confident about it. I think the most logical thing that's going to happen is that after Tyler Myers' bonus gets paid, they're going to trade him to Arizona. Like 100%, I say book it, because then his salary is $1 million or whatever, and he's a $6 million cap hit. So
yeah, and they have like no cap.
Yeah.
I would buy on that. I would buy on that for sure. I feel like I've never been more convinced in my life that they're going to buy OEL.
They're definitely buying out OEL.
Like, how can they not? Since he's been hurt, seeing players like Brisebois and Willan and like they're not just playing as well as he did. Like, they're playing better than him, which is saying because they're not great, but he's. And so, looking at the buyout calculator, I don't have it in front of me, but like if they do it this offseason, next season it only burns them for like less than 200K on the cap. And then it's 2 seasons of pain at like 4 mil. And then after that, it's not terrible. Like it does drag on for like 7 years after that or something like that. But it's not terrible. And it's like it's not a financial decision, I think. I think it's a hockey decision that they have to make. Like get that body off the roster because he's just not helping the team.
Well, I think too, if they're serious about their plan to compete for the playoffs next season, which we'll get into later too, they have to do it. Essentially, like you have to move that player. You can't bring him back. And unless his injury becomes something that he can't come back from, which crazier things have happened on the Canucks, I think you buy him out.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, I would say unlikely the injury thing, but you never know. And that would be like best case scenario, not for him, obviously.
But for the team,
yeah. So yeah, and then there's going to be a team like Arizona who might want to trade for that contract if he's a guaranteed LTIR guy.
Can you imagine?
No.
So depressing.
Anyway, yeah. So there's all that. I guess we should probably talk a few trades.
For sure.
So the trade deadline really started on like the 23rd.
Yeah.
With the Bruins, who kind of shot their shot. They made another move that was big too. But on the 23rd, they really kicked things off. We're trading a first, a second, a third, and Craig Smith's contract to Washington for Dmitry Orlov and Hathaway. Orlov seems to have fit in really well for them, which is scary because they've been just killing everybody.
So the thing about both of those players, and this was what someone else said, not me, someone smarter than me, but I agree with it, is that they both feel like Bruins. Like they went and they got players that were Bruins, but not wearing the same jersey as the Bruins basically before, because like they fit so well with that team. Even Hathaway, like on any other team, I'd be like, whatever. But on the Bruins, I'm like, no, it makes sense. Like he's a Bruin. And Orlov has suddenly turned into Bobby Orr. So I don't know, like there's a part of me that thinks that team has just been too good all season and they're gonna get like the Tampa Bay treatment in the playoffs, and maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, but like we'll see what happens in the playoffs, and we'll see what happens down the last part of the stretch here, because it's possible they start sitting, their better older players to get them rested up for the playoffs. But if that works or if it doesn't work in hockey, I don't know. About the whole peaking too soon and building up towards the playoffs and all that. So but I like those moves for Boston. I think they're very smart, especially when you consider like the price that Columbus wanted for Gavrikov, which was the team that that was the defenseman that they were rumored to be in on before, and they essentially went out and got a better defenseman and a bottom six forward for the same price.
Yeah, and they paid a little extra to get rid of Smith's contract, which was like $4 million or something. But to make it fit, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I think we both agree that was a big win for Boston on that one.
Yeah.
And we'll go back to Washington on that because they kind of
made some interesting moves.
Yeah, they made a Canuck type move on that where they moved that. I'm just going chronologically here and skipping minor ones, but the next big one for our market was the Canucks waited out the Rangers and got Vitaly Kravtsov, who was, I think, what was he, 13th overall pick in 2018 or something like that?
Yeah, he might have even been higher than that. He might have been 10th.
All right, so he was a high first round pick a number of years ago. They got him from the Rangers for a 7th in 2026, and William Lockwood, who's just a grinding fourth liner. He doesn't look like he'll ever be anything more than that, and he was a very replaceable grinding fourth liner. I was stoked about it right off the hop because I remember the World Juniors that he played on a line with Podkolzin, and they were dynamic for the Russians. And I remember at that draft, I think the Flyers maybe were picking 13th. Maybe that's why I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I really wanted Kravtsov to fall to them, and the Rangers took him, which was like big thorn because I hate the Rangers.
Of course.
So great patience by Canucks management to wait the Rangers out, who they knew were trying to free up cap to make moves we're going to talk about. And Kravtsov looked like a decent middle six forward. He seems to have fit in well. He's played okay on the second power play unit. He seems to be enjoying being on a team with not only his buddy Podkolzin, but all of a sudden the contingent of Russians is like Kravtsov, Podkolzin, Kuzmenko. I know McKenna hurt, but he's there,
Yeah, the thing with Kravtsov, right? Like the upside is there. If he gets the opportunity to show it, or if he works hard enough to show it, like one or the two, it's up to him. The only fear with him, right, is that that's possible at the end of the season he goes back to Russia. But if that happens, whatever, you gave up a 7th like 3 years from now. Doesn't really matter. And Lockwood, I guess, but it's completely like a free poker chip, basically. You don't know what you've got, but he might turn out to be very good. So
and just with the Russians in Vancouver, like I would bet him staying versus him going at this point.
I agree. I think it was a safe bet for the Canucks, and especially since the rumor was that the Rangers were asking for Höglander for him. The fact that they gave it ended up being what it was to get him is very good work by Alvin.
Totally. Going up the list, Barbashev went to Vegas from St. Louis, who were selling off like crazy. I think we already talked about the Tarasenko trade a little while back. And they got back Zach Dean, who was Vegas's first round pick last year. Is that right?
Or the year before, one of the two, but yeah.
A recent first rounder. So decent price for St. Louis to get for Barbashev, who was a UFA. I don't know. I would give the win to Vegas just because they got the better player in the deal.
Yeah, I agree. I liked a lot of what St. Louis did. Like I think we can get to this when we talk about the Canucks later, but I think they're doing something that the Canucks should have done like 5 years ago very, very effectively.
Yeah. I agree. So then we fast forward a couple trades to the first real massive one here, where the Devils, it was no secret they were the leader in the Timo Meier sweepstakes, and they got him and a handful of other players and a 5th round pick for the high-end prospects and a couple 4th liners and a 1st and another 1st and a 7th from San Jose.
So this one is the one for me that I'm like, this is an absolute slam dunk for New Jersey. the fact they didn't have to give up like any of their top prospects like Holtz or like Hughes on defense or Nemec
Mercer.
on defense, like any of them, they didn't have to give up, and they got Meyer. Like, yeah, really big win.
Totally. And one of the players, just for a fun Canucks thing, was Mukama Doolin, who I'm pretty sure was the first round pick that Canucks traded to Tampa for JT Miller, who traded to New Jersey for Blake Coleman.
Yeah, it's going around.
So for the people that were pissed off, they gave him first for Miller, like that was what, 3 or 4 years ago, and that, like, he hasn't been an AHL or an NHL player yet, as far as I know.
No, but I mean, remember too that was the year. It was a 2020 pick, and he's a defenseman.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's unusual that he hasn't made it to the NHL yet.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I guess the takeaway is a couple high prospects for San Jose and 2 first-round picks.
Yep.
For a player that they probably were smart to move in terms of, like, they're doing a rebuild. And it's obvious they're doing a rebuild.
Yeah, they sold high on him. I don't know if they sold high on him. They sold on him because to me, I think you could have gotten more. He is like a 40-goal scorer. He's a very good player, and he's young, right? But he does have the big qualifying offer. But New Jersey's a team that can handle that, and I think that they have their internal cap set right now anyway with Jack Hughes. So it'll be interesting to see if he pushes beyond that, but I think they'll probably sit down with him and he'll take a little bit less than Jack Hughes. That's my prediction.
Yeah, and I mean, if they have any amount of success in the playoffs, like, why wouldn't he want to? You know, I think everyone would agree that the Devils have arrived sooner than expected, so they're playing with house money a little bit. So why not go get the top fish on the market? You know.
And the Swiss connection too. There's 3 Swiss players there now, I believe. Obviously Hischier, and then who's the other one? There's one on defense, but there's 3 Swiss players in New Jersey now. So
right, there you go.
Yeah.
So New Jersey shoots their shot, makes the big move, and then an hour and a bit later, Tampa Bay blows up the internet by giving 6 pieces to Nashville for Tanner Jeannot, who I understand is a heavy playoff type player who had almost Calder finalist type year last year. He's under team control. He's qualifying offers like less than $1 million.
Yeah.
But they did give up a first, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and Cal Foote, who was a first round pick a number of years ago and hasn't been able to really crack it in Tampa Bay.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say about Tampa is every year they do this and people are like, why are they doing this? And then it ends up that the move's pretty smart for them. He totally fits the category, like the style, not style, but like the attributes of players that they go after, and that he's young. He will be cost controlled. Like he's an RFA, I believe. And also Tampa's picks are not not weighted as they normally would be. Like a first for them is basically a second. But that being said, all those picks are way in the future too, I believe. Yeah. I think the first was in like 25 or something. So who knows? Maybe Tampa falls apart. But even if they do fall apart, they have so many pieces on their roster that they could sell and get prospects and picks back. So for me, because it's Tampa, I don't mind it, but I think the price is out. Like, don't believe me, I think that price is insane. And I definitely give the win to Nashville. But if it works out for Tampa, I won't be surprised. That's all.
I mean, the only picks in this draft are the 3rd and the 4th.
Okay.
But I agree with you. Win to Nashville for, like, I'm sure when they got this offer, they looked at it and went, how can we not?
Yeah.
You know, but the one thing I'll say for Tampa is I looked at their roster, their forwards with Jeannot in the lineup, and their bottom 6 is like, what a pain that bottom 6 is going to be for whoever they're playing in the playoffs.
Toronto.
Well, whoever, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, they got Ross Colton, they got Nick Paul, they've got Corey Perry, they got Tanner Jeannot. Like they're pretty well-rounded, like almost 2 third lines down there now.
They're deep.
And if he starts to perform better than what he's been playing this year, like, it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
we've had a lot to cover. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit going
Sure.
through the trades now before we get to our end. We just finished talking about Tampa Bay getting Tanner Jeannot. Moving up, the next one was the Leafs we'd already thought that they made their shot or shot their shot, so to speak, and got Ryan O'Reilly and Nola from St. Louis for some high picks. Kyle Dubas was pretty upfront in saying he wasn't done. He was not lying. He went and got Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty from the Blackhawks for another first and a second.
Yep.
There's a couple other pieces in there, but basically it was adding depth to a team that he needs to be all in on, because he will probably lose his job if they don't go past the first round. And seeing teams like Tampa fill out their bottom forwards and stuff like that and get critical depth pieces, they probably felt like this was the move to make. So I don't know. They both are under contract for next year as well, right? Or Jake McCabe has 2 years left and Sam Lafferty has one more.
Something like that, yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I can't not give the win to Toronto for this, because they have to. Like they had to do everything they did.
So the only reason why I give it to Chicago is because literally no one knew who Sam Lafferty was before the season started. And I mean, Jake McCabe, like, yeah, he was a solid, like, depth defenseman. But I think for them to raise their trade value to the point where they got a first and a second, I give the win to them only because of that. But I agree. I think the pieces are great for Toronto.
Yep.
Yeah.
Small one because it's Canucks, though. We'll quickly laugh about how the Canucks were able to offload Riley Stillman only a few months after getting him from Chicago and not retaining any money, getting him off the books for next year. And they got a prospect by the name of Josh Bloom, who's having a decent OHL year or QM year.
And this is the point, like, if you stop in the time period of the trade deadline right now, if you stopped it, I'd be like, wow, I'm so happy the Canucks, they're acquiring picks, they're acquiring young players. This is great. Never experienced this before. It was a good time.
And then the next 4 days happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, try to quickly go through these.
Yep.
Oilers finally offload Jesse Puljujarvi to Carolina for a prospect and no longer have to worry about paying him. He's been slightly above what we would call a bust, I think, in Edmonton.
Yeah, I think that honestly, in terms of a fit, I feel like Carolina's a pretty good spot for him just because they seem to acquire a ton of Finnish players. And I think, like, he's defensively sound, but he doesn't put up points. And it feels like it fits with Carolina to me. Like, he just kind of fits. But Edmonton needed to also get rid of money. So
yes, which we will get to. Chronologically, next, Minnesota needed goals. They got Marcus Johansson from Washington for a third. I think they needed to do more, but whatever. I don't think they were willing to go for it this year.
No.
So whatever. It was a trade. The next one I found really interesting, and I liked it for both teams. Toronto traded Rasmus Sandin to Washington and got Boston's first round pick from Washington from the Orlov deal, as well as Eric Gustafsson.
Yep.
To me, it just looked like Sandin had been given lots of opportunities, especially when Morgan Riley got hurt, to kind of step up and show he could be the guy, and he never really did.
Yep.
Very inconsistent and not very strong defensively. So Gustafsson seems to come in as like insurance as a power play quarterback for Morgan Riley. If he goes down for whatever reason, they recouped a first round pick, which is going to be late, but who cares?
Yeah.
And Washington, I think, made a smart gamble here. Since their team is getting older, John Carlson's getting older, maybe the change of scenery is going to be exactly what Sandin needed, getting out of the spotlight in Toronto a little bit. I know since he's been in Washington, he's been putting up points.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, I think for me personally, I give the win to Toronto on this one. They had too many defensemen after acquiring McCabe and Shen. And Sandin, as you said, never really panned out to be everything he was meant to be. in Toronto. So I think it was smart for them. I do kind of get the feeling that like Kyle Dubas probably wanted to trade that first again for something else, and then it didn't work out. But
Yeah.
who cares? He got a first round pick. It's late, but I'd say it's tidy.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the Leafs were on a bit of a spree here because then they traded Engvall to the Islanders for a third, which again, why not? Because they were obviously filling up their depth spots with people like Lafferty and Achari.
Yep.
Who they felt would help them in the playoffs better than Engvall.
Yep.
So
And I
good for
think
them.
Engvall is another player, like he'd had his opportunity to show what he could do in Toronto, and he was never overly physical, even though he's pretty big. And so I think like the fit wasn't there, basically.
Yeah,
Never
totally.
there. Yeah.
They've seen Engvall in the playoffs for a few years now, and they knew what they would have had if they kept him. And
Yeah.
like we talked about, they had to do something different because they need to get over the hump this year.
And a third
Unfortunately,
is a pretty good return for a player like Engvall too, I'd say.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then the Canucks got in the game. They got a third round pick for Luke Shen. Love it. Wanted Shen to go back to Toronto. It's where he was drafted. If there's any reason I'm going to root on the Leafs this year, it will be purely for Luke Shen. And like, you know, he's going to be a warrior in the playoffs. He's shown it. He's got a couple cup rings with Tampa in recent years.
Yep.
I hope he does well.
Yeah, I'm happy for Shen. I can't cheer for the Leafs, but I'm happy for Shen.
Next one here, we talked about already very quickly. The Oilers made some cap space with Puljujärvi going out. They acquired Matthias Ekholm, who I believe is under contract next year as well.
Yes.
For Tyson Barrie, Reed Schaefer, who is a former first. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
And then their first round pick this year and a fourth. Like we talked about already with Nashville, I think it was a really smart move for them. They got a good haul for Ekholm. Their team was stagnating, and I think Tyson Barrie is going to fit in well on a team that was mostly defensive defensemen except for Yossi.
Yep.
Ekholm's been good, but Edmonton's just still a mess.
Yeah, I mean McDavid 150 points probably. Like I don't know what to say about Edmonton.
I don't know either. It's crazy. And the world's worst kept secret was Patrick Kane wanted to go to the Rangers. They did it. The Rangers pulled it off. They only had to give up a conditional second round pick and a fourth, basically, to get him.
Yeah.
What happens. It's what happens when you give them one team. Because at least they got something, and I still think the Rangers are going to make it to the second round at the very most. I don't have any belief in them. Not only because I hate them, but because
I actually take you one step further. I don't think they make it out of the first round. I think they've changed their roster too much, and I just don't think that it works out for teams usually when you do this. So yeah, unless Shesterkin goes like crazy mode, I don't see them winning around.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, you look at the players they acquired besides Tyler Mott, like they're not big body grinding players, right? Like they're all like finesse
scores. Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like the Leafs like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll give the win to the Rangers because they got the best player, but Leafs Chicago got something for him, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's an absolute win for New York, like only because they're getting Patrick Kane, who I really despise, but he is like arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest American-born player of all time. For marketing purposes for the team, I think it's a win just there. And then if you look back to like your boys last year with Claude Giroux, like that trade looks a lot better for the Flyers now.
Yes. And we will get to the Flyers.
Yeah.
Next one was a big one. Everyone knew Gavrikov was going somewhere. Gavrikov and Korpisalo go from Columbus to the Kings in a shocker where Quick went back to Columbus for a conditional first and a third. We'll just cover that like Columbus flipped a Quick right away to Vegas, I guess out of respect for him wanting to compete and Columbus sucking for like nothing. So
good on Columbus.
Yeah. I mean, They did it. They got a first and a third for Korpisalo and Gavrikov, which is basically amounts to like a first for Gavrikov and a third for Korpisalo, which is the rumor was they were asking for a first and a third for just Gavrikov. So I guess they brought down their ask a little bit after they lost their deal with Boston, but
Yeah.
I think it helps LA quite a bit. Like, I don't think Korpisalo is going to be the answer net, but I think he's a good safety net.
Yep. And I know that he like in the bubble playoffs, he was the goalie that like stoned the Leafs in the first round.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of like precedent for him playing well in like a playoff type series. At least this is what I was hearing in the hype for him getting moved before the trade deadline.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Could help LA. Like, I feel like they could be a sneaky pick in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I think like I think Gavrikov for a first is almost a crazy overpayment, but for LA, I think he's the type of defenseman they need.
Yeah, and
So,
they're pretty well stacked on defense
yeah.
now too.
And they also didn't have to give up any of their young top prospects. So
True, very true. Small one, kind of Lars Eller to the Avalanche from the Capitals for a second in 2025.
Yep.
Makes sense. We knew they wanted to upgrade at center. They probably wanted a bigger name, but I think they felt confident in the fact that, like, what was it, 3 of the 4 guys they paid big to acquire last year, and Josh Manson and Arturi Lehkonen, and one more they kept after they traded for him last year. So that plus the West, nobody really pushing all the chips in.
Yeah.
I feel like they feel confident enough with what they got. And if Landeskog ever friggin' comes back, they probably have the best chance to come out of the West.
Yeah, I think just based on roster, the only thing I would say is like Makar has had like concussion problems this year, and that's a little bit scary for me with the team.
Yeah.
But I think that roster wise they've got the most talent in the West by far. I'm not sure about their goalies, but as I said, I don't think any of the goalies in the West are particularly that strong this year. But
okay, a couple big trades, then I'm going to start fast forwarding real big time.
yeah.
Out of nowhere, the Canucks acquire Hronek and a 4th round pick in this year's draft for the Islanders' 1st round pick and their own 2nd round pick. So shocking, but if you line it up, and I know you're not supposed to do this, but if you line it up and you do it as the Horvat and Hronek trade, the Canucks trade Horvat and a 2nd for Hronek, Beauvillier, Ratty, and a 4th, which makes it feel less terrible.
Okay, I don't I don't agree, but that's because I also don't have much faith in Aatu Räty. And I'm willing to be completely proven wrong on this one, but if you're talking about getting back, like, the Canucks, to me, they were doing it all so right. They were on the right path, and then they just U-turned. And honestly, like, giving up the Islanders first was bad, but including that 2nd round pick, which will be a top 40 pick because it's the Canucks.
Yeah.
That's the part for me that I don't understand. And like, I will say this, Filip Hronek is a very good defenseman. He's basically what the Canucks need. But to me, this screams like it's the exact same trade as the JT Miller trade 5 years ago, where the player's very good and he'll feel like on the Canucks, he'll be a big improvement. But I just don't think it's the right time. But now that this has happened, there's a 0% chance that they're trading Demko. Like, it's 0. Because they're not even retooling. This is the thing that bugs me. Because like, if I look at St. Louis, for example, and you have the 2 young players, you have like Kyrou and Thomas, you're retooling around those 2 players and you're shipping out all your veterans. The Canucks don't do that. They've never done it. And it just drives me up the wall. And again, the problem with the Horvat trade becoming Beauvillier, Hronek, and Räty and a 4th is like, okay, Hronek next year is going to get paid and it's not going to be cheap. Beauvillier, if they keep him, he's going to get paid, but we'll see. Maybe they trade him. Ratu then has to become the cost-effective player out of those three. Because if you're trying to compete with Pettersson and with Hughes, and Pettersson is going to get a really big fat paycheck next year, like, you have to start accumulating young, cost-efficient players, which the Canucks have never done. And Horvat was a really good chance to kickstart that, and it drives me up the wall that they just moved it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, it just makes me circle back to your point, like with Hronek coming in and he's going to need to get paid. Like you're bang on. Like they're going to trade Myers to Arizona. They're going to buy out OEL, and their big mandate from within their organization, but probably from ownership, is keep the forward group and rebuild the defense.
And I've like the other thing is, right, is they're heavily rumored to be in on Gavrikov in the offseason because he's also a Milstein client, and the Canucks might as well just get every single one of his onto their team.
Right.
So I could see that happening, and then you bring like either maybe Shen comes back, maybe he doesn't, but you have a top four there that's much better than what you've had this year.
Yeah.
But again, if you just want to I'll briefly talk about the Canucks for 2 seconds. Because for me, this whole winning period that they're going on is a total mirage. And I'm only saying it because last year I bought into it. I was like, okay, they're better than what they showed at the beginning of the year. But we knew that they were going to be better basically when they hired Tocchet. We knew it because their season, the schedule's a lot easier. He was going to employ some sort of system that was probably better than Boudreau's non-system. We knew that, like, we knew that they get the most out of players because that's usually what happens when a coach comes in, and that's all great. But is like, I can't buy into the team, and even with Pettersson and Hughes, who I love both of them, but I don't know. I think it's a mirage.
Yeah, well, yeah, they really wanted the right-hand defenseman. They paid a price.
Stevie Y, man.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll get to that quickly too. How smart he was to extend Dylan Larkin like right before selling off a couple of his top players.
Oh, so smart. It
Right?
just drives me crazy.
Yeah, real smart. I wonder how Larkin felt about that. So
Yeah. Again, I'm sure it's painful to some degree, but that team's going to be good. I mean, they have Mo Seider, and like part of the reason why they could move Hronek was because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, on that note, then, like Dylan Larkin, just before they traded Hronek, signed an 8-year extension at 8.7 per. He's 26. It's going to take until he's 34. Like, I love that contract. I think he is worth a little bit more than Bo Horvat, and he's a bit younger. So I think that was smart for them to hold on to their franchise center, and like they're obviously building around Larkin and Seider at this point.
Well, I mean, they do have like Raymond, and am I forgetting someone on forward that they have that's not Lucas Raymond?
I don't know. Are you?
I don't know, but the thing that's the only thing I would say about the Larkin contract is, I mean, at the end of it, he's not going to be their best player, but that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
You pay for that. I don't know. I think like he's very comparable to Bo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the re-signing note too, Pasternak got all the money. He got 8 years, 90 million, 11.25 per. I think we all thought he was probably going to get around 11.
Yeah.
Even if Boston has their everyone takes less to win thing, but like he's a game breaker. He scores a lot of goals. He's still young. That'll take him as well till he's 34.
Yep.
Smart for them to lock him up.
Yeah, he's definitely he's like a top 5, top 10 player in the league. I don't know where you'd rank him. He's definitely a top 5 forward.
Totally. In our fantasy pool, he's number 2 in our league.
Yeah. He scores basically at will, like goals. There's not that many out there who can score like him. It makes sense. I mean, Boston is in some ways so lucky. They're also very smart that they got him, because it was like 23rd or 24th overall when they drafted him. And he's just turned into a total game breaker for them. So
yeah, real good. Okay, flying back through the last big trades, because there's a couple, but we're almost done. Ottawa fleeced Arizona in getting Chicheret. They've been talking about how Arizona wanted like the equivalent of 3 first-round picks forever for Chicherin. Ottawa is apparently like one of the top places he wanted to go.
Yep.
They got for a conditional first, a conditional second, and another second.
Very smart.
Very good move for Ottawa, and also I like it because I think it's gonna give me another hot take from the beginning of the year. Correct, because I think I said Ottawa is going to trade for Chicherin, but then still not make the playoffs.
I think you're right, actually.
I think I said that. So we're tracking in that direction. He's for a couple more years. They had to trade him, and good for Ottawa. He'll fit right in with that young group. I like it. I like it for Ottawa a lot.
I think it's smart. And again, like you think about Ottawa's defense, like they've for a long time it's been Thomas Chabot and then no one else. But now they have like Jake Sanderson coming up. They have Chychrun there. Those 3 are pretty solid 3 to build around.
Totally. The outrage in Pittsburgh when they were rumored to be getting JT Miller or Brock Besser, and then they only traded a second-round pick from Mikael Granlund. Good for Nashville, trade, get a high pick and a deep draft. Well, I mean, it'll be like probably in the 50s, but still. And Granlund off the books at $5 million for next year as well. I just don't see Granlund helping Pittsburgh all that much.
I don't understand this move at all for Pittsburgh. I don't know how much I believe the JT Miller rumors, only again after the Hronek trade. And maybe it was that they were really trying to broker with a third team to get a young center back for Vancouver as opposed to the first round picks that they would have gotten. But I don't know how much I believe it, just because it doesn't seem like they're moving in any sort of direction that I would take the team. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Pittsburgh is under a lot of pressure too. Like they haven't made it out of the first round since before COVID. And I think that if they miss this year, there might be some changes. So we'll see. But I give the win obviously to Nashville. I think getting a second for Granlund right now is good, very good.
Totally. Yeah. And that gives them 2 seconds with the Niederreiter trade in this deep draft too. So
yeah.
Plus their own first, plus Edmonton's first. Like good for them. Doing it right. It's painful. Yeah. The Fire Hextall chants were going on prior to and probably after that trade.
Yeah.
Hextall's a bum. Anyways, Boston pulls off another big trade to add a very Boston-like player. Detroit being smart. Rumored for a long time to be looking to move Tyler Bertuzzi, move him to Boston for a first and a fourth. Next year's first, but still.
It's all good.
Yeah, that means they've got New York Islanders and their own first this year. They've got Boston and their own first next year. So
and you never know with Boston too. I know we've said it for years, but there has to be at some point where they start going down. Aging has to exist, right?
Totally. I mean, Bertuzzi UFA at the end of the year, but he might re-sign in Boston, and that'll help alleviate some of the older players.
That's true.
Retiring or falling off or whatever. So I like the move for Boston. It feels like Bertuzzi is a very Boston-like player. I like the move better for Detroit because Stevie Y just obviously has a good grasp on what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree.
So then skipping ahead because there's a bunch of just nothings. Like I guess you can talk about Max Domi went to Dallas for a second and Khudobin's contract.
Yeah.
Like, great, Dallas, you got Max Domi. Who cares? No one in the West was that impressive, right? And then Pittsburgh being super smart and awesome got Nick Bonino because he's
that one might be more hilarious than the Granlund one.
Right. Yeah. So whatever. Quickly, because it's Canuck talk, they signed Lazar at the beginning of the year for 3 years, $1 million every year, and he just produced like, I don't know what it was, 5 points or 6 points. He wasn't the depth guy that they thought he was going to be. He was supposed to be like a right-handed centerman to come in and help out. He didn't play center very much, and even when he did, he didn't win many faceoffs. So flipped him to New Jersey. He's off the books for the next 2 years for a 4th round pick in next year's draft. Whatever, retool, shape. If they don't work out, at least move them out for something.
I would have been way happier with that trade if the Hronek trade hadn't happened. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know, Pittsburgh again, awesome. Got Kulikov from the Ducks for a 3rd and got rid of McGinn's contract. Like, I don't know. Good job, Kulikov. I will say quickly that Jordan Greenway going to Buffalo was surprising that Minnesota was able to get a second and a fifth for him.
Yeah.
Like I've always liked Greenway. Like it was probably like 3-4 years ago. I was like, man, that kid's huge and he's
Yeah.
going to dominate this league. And he never did. He's had a pretty poor year this year, and he just signed like a 3-year, $10 million deal.
Yeah.
And he wasn't fitting with Minnesota, and somehow they're able to get him off the books for the next 2 years, considering how much cap hell they are in with their buyouts.
That's impressive.
For a second and fifth. Like I was very surprised. So
Yeah,
like,
I do feel like his game matches up well with Buffalo's like style. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how he does there. But yeah, like basically buying low on a player, but having to pay. So not really buying low, but buying him at his lowest point at retail price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the final one that I'm going to talk about, because there was a bunch of little ones that don't really matter, was Anaheim signed Klingberg in the offseason to a 1-year deal, and everyone thought he is going to be flipped and they'll probably get a first for him or whatever. And he's just been terrible in Anaheim. They flipped him to Minnesota at the deadline, keeping 50% of his salary, and they basically got Schuster and a fourth for him.
Yeah.
Kind of a weak return. I don't know if he's going to help Minnesota, but they at least did something.
Yeah, so both times teams have done that where they've like bought a player for 1 year at high salary, like Taylor Hall and then now Klingberg. Hasn't worked out.
No.
So I wonder if we'll see that much anymore, but who knows? But Klingberg's been a little bit better in Minnesota. He's gotten me a couple fantasy points since showing up in mini, so maybe he'll be better there.
There you go. Okay, well, we've circled all the way through everything. It's been a long talk, but it's been a good talk. I don't know, do you have any other ending final points, notes? We've ripped on the Canucks well enough, I think.
Do you want to quickly touch on the Flyers?
Oh yes, okay. So there was only one team that their moves at the deadline cost the GM their job, and it was the Flyers. It felt like the Canucks had the worst GM in the league with Jim Benning for years, and then when he got fired, it was like, well, Fletcher is the worst GM in the league by far. He's been terrible for the Flyers, and there's a lot of rumors that like he's being told what to do by the Bobby Clarks and the Paul Holmgrens and whatever. But now that he's been fired, it makes you think maybe it wasn't so much them and it was him trying to make these moves.
Yeah.
But when like the biggest fish on deadline day because of all their moves was James Van Riemsdyk, and you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like you didn't sell anything. Your team's terrible. You're like the coach is putting out things about how they have to rebuild, and you can't sell off anybody. You can't do anything.
It was very similar to Jim Benning's. Like we ran out of time.
Yeah, it was embarrassing.
Yeah,
really embarrassing. So, good he's gone. Like I don't know, it's been tough the last few years. Even when Hextall was the GM, it was starting to become tough because he was at that time he kind of had a core that looked like they could contend, but he was too hesitant to move picks and prospects to bolster that.
Yeah,
and it cost the job. And then Fletcher came in and was like, I'm gonna trade all the picks and prospects because we're gonna win, and he made just terrible moves.
Yeah,
the team is awful. So with the way they did Claude Giroux last year, where he was willing to trade to Florida and then come back in order to help the team get some picks and prospects, and then back in the summer, and they said no, we're moving in another direction, was very difficult for me. Like he's been my favorite player for 15 years, and so this year I've definitely paid very little attention to the Flyers and been following the Senators, and you know I've got my Giroux Ottawa jersey now. Like I've been rooting on Ottawa a lot more. It's gonna take a lot. It's gonna take a lot for me to get back into that Flyers thing. I think Briere could be good. You know, they say he's a smart guy. I don't know. Drury's doing okay in New York, but it's still early for him.
He's saying the rebuild word in Philadelphia, which is, you know, something that is nice to hear.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. And I think he'll probably do well. But who knows?
Yeah. If I were them, I would be rebuilding around Konechny.
Yep. Not moving him.
Yeah, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you got an offer that blew the doors off because he's on such a good contract,
Yep.
you'd have to consider it. But yeah, Fletcher out, Briere in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been one lengthy catch up on the old Hockey Talk on the Rock, but it was our centennial episode, so why not do it?
Yeah.
So that's Laura. I'm Keith. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back sometime in the future, maybe around playoff time. I don't know.
Woo!